Hello. Well, we're glad that you're here. These are Stories with Eric. If you enjoy any of these, do the YouTube thing, which is like, share, and subscribe. And that'll help us get these stories out to as many people whom, right now in our day and age, we do need to hear stories from friends. Now, this particular story is not my own. I have no idea who wrote it. Uh, Way back in 1989, I was a camp counselor at Sequoia Christian Service Brigade Camp in northern Alberta. Not northern Alberta. I'm in northern Alberta now. Northern California. Uh, yeah, around Pinecrest Lake, that neighborhood, that area. Anyway, um, I was a teenager, junior counselor, and there was a senior counselor who was a couple years older than me, Ted Randall, who told this story. It was at our evening campfires, and it became such a huge thing that it was almost nicknamed by the campers the Garden Story Night. And so kids would be looking forward to hearing the garden story. I learned it from him, and then when I left Christian Service Brigade camps in about 1991, I became a youth pastor and told the story at my youth group. At Wolf Mountain Summer Camp in 1992. I told it every Wednesday night up at a big hay barn with just a bunch of boys and the boy counselors, and we would tell the story every week. I told the story at summer camps. It became a thing, and what's amazing is Ted Randall said he didn't make up the story. He learned it from his counselor. I don't know who that counselor is. Someone somewhere made up the story. I've looked in gobs of literature. I've never found the garden story. I don't think it's ever been written down. If it has, please let me know. If you, in fact, have made the story, please let me know. I don't mean any pirating or stealing. However, what is beautiful about this story is in my ministry, telling it for 30 plus years, is that the story, once it's told to a particular camp, the camp owns the story, or the church owns the story, or the knight owns the story. And no one possesses it. It becomes part of the thing. And so, with that background, the garden story. Janie noticed something that she had never noticed before. She was standing at the light, waiting for it to turn green, when out of the corner of her right eye she saw something new. In a city that never had new things before. Old, gray, a exhaust-covered city. And yet, here was this thing that shouldn't belong there. And why hadn't she noticed it before? Curiosity got the best of her, and so when the light had turned green, she walked across the street to find this new thing. When she came up to the abandoned lot, there was the cinder block stone enclosure, walls that stretched up about 5 feet above her head. She looked to the far ending of those walls, and it was about a 15-minute walk to each corner. She walked around one corner, then the other, and finally on the third corner, there was a narrow, tiny little gateway. Wrought iron fence with a bunch of ivy that covered it so that you couldn't peek through to find out what was on the other side. Janie knew she shouldn't enter. Was told don't enter into strange buildings or enclosures. Yet, something inside of her, she couldn't help herself. She would just poke her head in. Well, when she poked her head in, opening the garden and crouching down, her head stepped into an entirely different world. It was a lush green world, bursting with smells colors. It had its own wind to it, a fresh, fragrant breeze of 1,001 different kinds of fruit trees. The ground was soft and green, covering as far as she could see. She couldn't help herself. She took a step in, and her foot felt like she was stepping on a pillow, and again a pillow, until finally she came upon a pathway, a beautiful collection of different colored rocks, pastel colors, dark earth tones. And she walked along the zigzag pathway under a grove of trees. Again, she couldn't help herself. She just kept entering into this world. The trees were of different kinds of fruit, all low-hanging. Fruit plump and rounded to perfection. Pears, apples, cherries. Off in the corner, exotic banana trees. Cool. And then surrounding the grove were bushes and bushes of berries. Beautiful, beautiful berries. Shooting out from the ground was roots of all kinds of food. And it was cool. There was a breath of the wind that blew through. It seemed to be the most natural, healthiest thing that Janie had ever taken into her lungs. The smog and the exhaust of her city life seemed to be washed through. She continued to follow this little trail all through the trees and came to a great big red barn, bright red, freshly painted. And she walked around the four corners of this large construction. And again, seeing garden on every side. And she was confused, mainly because when did this thing end? It was bigger on the inside than on the outside. And more puzzling was she could not find an entrance into the barn. She continued the pathway and found a antebellum mansion, jade colored, matching the garden. And the trail went further and further until the trees got shorter and shorter and shorter. And after about a 30 to 40 minute hike, the bushes, the trees, the flowers were nothing but shoots. And then it was soil between Janie to the rest of the enclosure, including the three corners of the walls that it kept her in. She figured it was about a third garden and 2/3 untilled, unspoiled, unplanted land. And the stillness that produced was a peace. "Hello!" a voice cried out. Excuse me. "Hello!" Janie whipped around and faced the garden again, and this time saw an old man, broad shoulders, strong stovepipe arms, a face where lines around his eyes and mouth suggested he spent an entire lifetime filled with laughter and joy. He looked down at her, towering above her, a clear foot. "I'm so glad you're here," he said. "What do you think?" Janie looked around, and the first thing out of her mouth was not praise, but apology. "I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. My caregivers, the people at the home, told me never to break into other buildings. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do this. I'm not a thief. I'm not trying to steal anything. I just was curious. I'm so sorry for being curious. And he silences her quietly and says, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Your foster people, parents, they raised you well. They raised you very well. All the many ones that you've had. But what do you think? It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I still haven't seen enough of it. I've been here for about a half hour. It's the most amazing place ever. She then said a comment that as soon as she said it, she immediately regretted it. I would give anything to live in a place like this. Anything? What if you got a place like this? What if you got this place for nothing? What? She asked. Yeah. What if everything I gave you, everything that was here, was yours, but it was a gift from me to you? However, with this gift, there's a couple of rules. If the rules are broken, that doesn't mean that you will lose the gift. The rules are here to help you enjoy the gift and make the gift be all that it should be. What do you say? What are the rules? She asked, still suspicious. Number one, I want you to live here every day, every week, every month, and stay here until the garden is finished. I'd like to go and work on some other gardens. And I've got my home garden that I need to make really, really, really great and big. So I give you this garden. You live here. And you work on the garden until it is finished. Janie thought to herself and said, that isn't so crazy. My home right now is miserable, and they're going to be moving me next to another miserable house and another one. What do I have to lose, really? Second rule, the old man said. You must use only what is in the garden to help the garden grow. Do not receive or take anything outside of the garden and bring it in. Trust that everything that is in the garden I have given you. A compost corner where everything was there. Rule number 3, anytime you need help, what hour? First, it had a wire on the end of it. So pick this up. Or if I can't answer the phone, I'll come to you to fix it. Now, those are the rules. If you can agree to the rules. She quickly said yes. Yes, it makes me so happy, the old man. It's absolutely wonderful. Come, let me show you the garden. So the rest of the day, he spent time touring around the garden. And then he left, and she spent on a hammock near eating berries off her chest. She was incredibly excited. Straight to the red barn, she got on her handful of seeds and marched straight towards the untilled, undeveloped soil. Laid a line of seeds, and then was going to create a trench and then move the seeds into. Working on the ground, it was like cement. For hours, the dirt was fixed. She walked back, defeating as for her failure. And again, the same thing. A week planted because the ground could not be moved. She went up, she got tools, she went out, nothing. Blisters on her fingers started to form. Creaks around her neck, shoulders started to shake. She could never stand upright, only hunched over. Sunburns all around her face and her body. It was horrible. And worse, she wasn't making any headway. Until finally one afternoon, she threw down her shovel out. I give up. And at that moment, a voice came from the wall. There was a man younger than looking really different. And he sat on the wall. "Hi," he said. "Can I come in?" "Sure," she said. And he jumped over the wall. Not through the gate, but over the wall. And as soon as he saw her, he couldn't stop talking. This is an incredible garden. This is a wonderful garden. You do a wonderful, amazing thing. However, I must tell you, and I have to be very, very clear about this, the old man doesn't give you everything you need. It's a fault of his own. He makes mistakes. He's really idealistic and kind of he's perfectionistic. He doesn't tell you everything you need to know. Mainly how to start a garden. Once the garden starts, sure, you could use all of his stuff you want, but you need an advantage. You need a quick help. Here is where I come in. He then quickly thrust a handful of seeds in Janie's hands. These seeds will plant themselves, they'll grow themselves, they'll take care of themselves. Everything will be taken care of by itself. All you gotta do is just scatter them and go do what you want to do. And don't waste your time gardening. Let the garden take care of itself. When you need more, let me in, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. The man turned around, walked back, jumped over the wall, and was gone. Janie looked at the seeds. Wasn't really sure about them. She took a couple, scattered them. Took a couple more, scattered them. And then a big wind, whoosh, all over everywhere. Oh no. The sun was setting. She tried picking up some, but couldn't. Until finally, she just gave up and went to bed. The next morning, a miraculous thing was taking place. From the seeds, little sprouts started growing up. Tiny little shoots. And in a week, these shoots began to interlock with each other, forming a small vine that grew larger and larger and larger and larger, until finally little things started popping out from the vines. Thorns and berries. These little berries were multicolored: red, blue, golden, fuchsia. Jamie, curious, picked up a red berry. Try fuchsia. So she picked up a fuchsia. Okay. Blue. Not bad. Not bad at all. Okay. And started living off the blue ones. Left the rest alone. And finally, that was all she was eating, were blue berries. And the vines grew and grew. And she would spend her entire days on the hammock, swaying back and forth, eating blueberries. And the blueberries, unlike all the other fruits and vegetables in the garden, didn't give her energy. They made her tired. They made her sleepy. Until one day, she woke up from the night before, and it was noon. Her shirt stained with blueberry juice. She opened her eye and looked around. She got up. Suddenly she had a moment of clarity. For the vines didn't stop growing when she stopped working the garden. In fact, they tripled, quadrupled. And now the vines were covering every single part of the garden, over the trees, over the stream, over the barn, everything. And the original garden could not grow because the vines were covering the sunlight, and it was stifling the growth and corrupting. "Oh no," she said. She quickly ran out to a vine to try to pull it off of a tree. But then, ow! There were these large nail-sized thorns sticking out of the vines. She quickly, it felt like there was maybe even a little poison in them. And she was like, spit it out. She says, what am I going to do? I've ruined everything. I was given this gift, entrusted to this garden, and I've made a mess out of it. And then a very painful thought came to her mind. I'll call the old man, ask him what I should do. If he wanted to take it back from me, that's fine. If he wanted to take it away from me, I'll live with that. But he needs to know that I'm sorry and that this is not a good thing. So she walked slowly to the red barn, covered in these vines. She found where she could kneel to enter into, covered with thorns. It cut her face and her shoulders as she waddled through. Dust was everywhere, for it had not been used in weeks. She picked up the phone and began to plead. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. It was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing, and so when I couldn't do what you asked me to do, I turned to other people, and now it's a mess. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. The old man, in a still small voice, said, don't worry. It's okay. We'll fix this. You're not losing your garden. That garden was a gift to you. But I can't help you. My son, though, is in your neighborhood. I'm going to send my son. Please let him do whatever needs to be done to rid this problem. Okay, she said. Call me when he leaves. Okay, she said. About a half hour later, coming through the gate was a spitting image of his father, the son. Same laugh lines around his face, broad shoulder, strong body, tall, younger, had, but had his own father's walk, had his own way of how the father spoke. And his eyes darted around all over the garden. And finally it rested on Janie. Okay, I know what needs to be done. He then walked over to the untilled part where the seeds were first sown. And there was a great big creature of a plant that had large, large spikes sticking out of it. He said, this is the heart of where all the vines are coming from. It needs to be removed. He quickly grabbed one side, grabbed the other side, and began to pull and pull and pull and pull and pull. And soon roots started popping out of the ground one by one. However, the spikes were digging into his wrists, started cutting up his legs as he was pulling more and pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling until finally it was released. And with all of the young man's strength, he spun once, twice, and on the third spin, tossed the heart over the wall and away from the garden, the vines going with it. However, tens of thousands of berries remained. They fell and sprinkled all around the soil. With blood and sweat all over his face and his arms, a broken man, the old man's son looked to Janie and said, call my dad. He staggered out of the garden, through the gate, and disappeared. Janie's heart was broken, for the amount of pain that he had to suffer because of her decisions was immense. So she made her way back to the barn, called the dad, And he said, "We're going to try something new," the old man said. "Every morning when you get up, call me. I'll tell you which seeds to pick, which tools to use, and how to work with the dirt. I think this might be best. And it's not that you'll be making this garden for me. We'll be working on this garden together." Jeannie agreed. And for the next morning, she did exactly what the old man said. She called. He told her which objects to pick from the barn, which seeds to use, where to start, which soil to use, and what time of day. And that first day was a success. The work was still hard. She still was tired at the end of each day, still knew what sweat felt like. But it was possible. And the next day, and the next day. And sooner more than later, the garden started to grow and work and be itself. What was amazing to Janie was she actually felt like she had a little bit more strength than she normally did than had she not called the old man. Well, the second corner was taken over, and soon the third corner. The months became years. Janie grew from a child to a young woman, to an adult, to middle-aged, and kept the routine the same. Wake up, call the old man, work together with him, plant more of the garden. And his phone calls to her weren't always massive instructions of, you need to do this and this and this. She would come up with some ideas, and he would come up with some ideas, and they would collaborate together. But it seemed like the old man was always one step ahead of Janie. So even when she came up with a good idea that he said, let's go for that, it felt like he knew she was going to propose that. Well, years and years of work. Janie enclosed in the last corner of the garden. And on one morning, based upon the instructions given, she had one seed in her hand, the small spade. She walked to the last untilled land of the garden, placed the seed on the ground, covered the soil, watered it. And in a few weeks, that seed grew a single stalk of flower, closed and then opened. It was a rose of black petals. She turned around and she saw the expanse of this world given to her, of color, of beauty, of joy, of life, of vibrancy. And in the stillness of that moment, she heard a noise that she had never heard before. The telephone rang. She made her way through the pathway that she had marked and cobbled to the red barn. She got on her hands and knees, a little harder now as an old woman. She came into the barn and picked up the telephone. The old man's voice, spry and ageless as ever, said, "Good job. Good job, Jeanie. Your garden is complete. You did fantastic work. Now, Jeanie, I want you to come to my house and help me work on mine. The end.